In this video, I am going to talk about the 4 ways you can fail the NCLEX and how to avoid them. The 4 ways to fail the NCLEX are: 1. Score significantly below the passing standard. 2. Score below the passing standard on your last ability estimate if you run out of questions. 3. Fail to answer the minimum number of questions in the allotted time. Or 4. Score below the passing standard even once in the last 60 questions when you answer more than the minimum number of questions and you run out of time. The NCLEX is designed to give you questions that will estimate if you are above or below a passing standard. The questions will get harder as you answer items correctly because they assume that if you can answer hard questions correctly, you will be able to answer easier questions correctly as well. To pass the NCLEX before running out of time or questions, you need to answer a minimum number of questions and score significantly above the passing standard. If you fail the NCLEX with 75 or more questions before you run out of questions, it means that you scored significantly below the passing standard, and the computer can predict that you would have failed the exam even if you had more questions to answer. To avoid this situation, obviously studying in advance would help. However, even with lots of knowledge, it is possible to fail the NCLEX if you are not familiar with how to answer NCLEX-style questions. That is why doing practice questions before the exam is a really good idea. I recommend using the website below. There are several other things that you can do during the exam that will help you perform at your best. In another video, I talk about how to decrease your anxiety and stay focused on doing your best. For my study tips, please watch my other NCLEX videos, visit the NCLEX website, and ask any questions you may have below. To pass the NCLEX, if you run out of questions, you need to have scored above the passing standard. If you get the maximum number of items possible on the NCLEX and you are not clearly above or below the passing standard, they look at the last question you answered to see if you scored above or below the passing standard. Remember that the final ability estimate will be based on data from all the questions you have answered. If it is above the passing standard, you will pass. If it is below the passing standard, you will fail. The last ability estimate is really important. When you are in the exam and you are nearing the end of your questions, it can cause people to get nervous, and some people will just start guessing randomly because they are giving up. Just because you have gotten a lot of questions does not mean that you are failing. The NCLEX cannot tell us what percentage of questions you need to answer correctly to pass because it is different for everyone. However, for illustration purposes, let's say that you need to get 85% of questions on your exam right for the computer to decide you have a 95% chance of passing and shut off before the exam is over. That means that if you are getting 80% of the questions right, the exam will keep going even though you're above the passing standard. Only people who are scoring close to the passing standard will get the maximum number of questions. People that do poorly on the NCLEX will fail with fewer questions because the computer is confident that they would not pass. So, you need to try your best not to get discouraged if you get a lot of questions on the NCLEX. Answering all of the questions does not mean that you are going to fail. Tell yourself that it is a good sign that the exam is still going because it means you have not failed yet. It is particularly important that you stay focused, think positively, and do your best to answer each question to the best of your ability, right to the very end. How you answer the questions at the end of your exam will have a large influence on if you pass or fail. Remember to trust yourself and all the preparation you have done to get yourself to this point. To pass the NCLEX, when you run out of time, you need to have answered a minimum number of questions and stay above the passing standard for the last 60 questions. Currently, the NCLEX-RN requires that a minimum of 75 questions are answered, and the NCLEX-PN requires that a minimum of 85 questions are answered. If you run out of time and you have not answered the minimum number of questions, then you will fail. So be sure that you answer at least 75 or 85 questions depending on which NCLEX you are writing. Normally, I suggest that you not rush, but if you are going to run out of time and you have not answered the minimum number of questions, then you need to decide how much time you can spend on each remaining question and get at least 75 or 85 questions answered depending on which NCLEX you are writing. About 2% of candidates run out of time. If you run out of time and have answered more than the minimum number of questions, then the computer will review the last 60 items to predict if you would have passed or failed the exam. Keep in mind that the NCLEX is designed to estimate your ability to pass based on how you respond to each item, but you do not need to answer each item correctly to stay above the passing standard. You will pass if the last 60 estimates of your ability were above the passing standard, so it is important to stay focused and not get discouraged if you are running out of time. If you go below the passing standard even once in the last 60 questions, you fail the exam. So don't rush and answer questions randomly. Take a deep breath, focus, and keep answering the best you can. Thank you for watching. For more information about how computerized adaptive testing works, I suggest checking out the link to the NCLEX-PN website below. The NCLEX-PN has some really good videos that explain how NCLEX testing works. Their videos show graphs of how the rules I have discussed above work. I also recommend watching my video with tips for what to do during the exam to help you pass. If you have more study time, my other study tip videos will also be helpful. If you are watching this video on the night before your NCLEX, I have a video for that as well. You can check out my playlist in the link below or on your screen and subscribe to be notified when more videos are released.